Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Deku was born as the reincarnation of a fallen god. Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. The world, for a 4-year-old Izuku Midoriya, was a vibrant symphony of primary colors and explosive sounds. It was the brilliant yellow of All Might's hair, the booming baritone of his laughter on the computer monitor, and the heroic crimson of his cape. It was a world of infinite potential, a universe where any dream was possible, especially the dream of becoming a hero. Today was the day that Symphony was supposed to assign him his own unique instrument, his quirk. The air in Dr. Tsubasa's office was sterile, smelling faintly of antiseptic and old paper. It was a stark, beige and white room, a muted backdrop for the riot of hope thrumming in Izuku's small chest. He sat on the crinkly paper of the examination table, his little legs swinging, kicking a happy rhythm against the metal frame. His All Might action figure was clutched so tightly in his hand that the plastic hero's spiky hair dug into his palm. "Well, Mrs. Midoriya," the doctor said, swiveling in his chair. Dr. Tsubasa was a man with a kind, weary face and goggles perched atop his balding head. He had seen thousands of children just like Izuku, their eyes sparkling with the same meteoric hope. He had also been the one to watch that light dim on more than one occasion. "The good news is, Izuku is a perfectly healthy boy." Inko Midoriya, a woman whose anxiety was a constant, gentle hum, let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "Oh, thank goodness. And his quirk? Do you know what it is?" "His father could breathe fire, and I can pull small objects toward me. We've been taking bets on what he might get." She laughed, a light, nervous sound. Izuku vibrated with excitement, his green eyes wide and fixed on the doctor. "Is it super strength? Or laser eyes? Or maybe a cool transformation quirk?" Dr. Tsubasa's smile didn't quite reach his eyes. He turned to his monitor, his brow furrowing slightly as he looked at the complex readings displayed on the screen. "That's where things get a bit unusual." He tapped a key, bringing up a brain scan overlaid with a swirling, colorful energy map. "This is a standard quirk factor analysis. For a child with an active quirk, we'd see a specific lobe of the brain glowing, a unique energy signature. For a quirkless child, the map is typically dormant, a flat line." He pointed to Izuku's scan. "His is either." On the screen, where there should have been a bright color or a placid gray, there was a patch of what looked like television static. It wasn't dormant, it was a void, an area of null energy that seemed to be actively devouring the light around it. It was a tiny black hole in the neurological map. "I've never seen a reading like this," the doctor confessed, leaning closer to the screen. "It's like there's a counter-frequency at play. An energy signature that isn't just absent, it's canceling." We ran the diagnostics 3 times. "The machine is working perfectly." He shook his head, a scientist confronted with an impossible result. "It's like trying to listen to the radio and only getting static, but the static is so powerful it's breaking the speakers." Inko's smile faltered. "Canceling? I don't understand. What does that mean for his quirk?" The doctor sighed, rubbing the bridge of his nose. He chose to fall back on the tangible, the scientifically accepted. He pulled up another image, an X-ray of a small foot. "This, however, is definitive." He pointed to a small, barely visible joint in Izuku's pinky toe. "You see this? It's the second joint. The prevailing theory for generations has been that as humanity evolved quirks, this vestigial bone was phased out. Those who have it are from an older, quirkless lineage. Izuku has it." The room fell silent. The sterile, antiseptic smell suddenly felt cloying, suffocating. The beige walls seemed to close in. "So, you're saying..." Inko's voice was a whisper. Izuku's legs stopped swinging. The All Might figure felt cold in his hand. "I'm sorry, kid," Dr. Tsubasa said, his voice laced with a practiced, gentle pity that felt worse than any shout. He turned away from the baffling static on the screen and looked at the boy. "It's not going to happen. You're quirkless." The symphony in Izuku's world didn't just stop. It was annihilated. The vibrant colors bled out into a miserable gray. The booming sounds of heroism were replaced by a deafening, crushing silence. The only thing left was the static, the very same static from the doctor's screen, now roaring in his ears, in his soul. It was a profound and hollow emptiness, a feeling not of absence, but of a great and terrible loss. Something that was supposed to be there, something vast and luminous, had been stolen from him before he was ever born. That night, the apartment was dark and quiet, save for the flickering light of the computer screen. It was playing his favorite video, All Might's debut, on a loop. The towering hero, carrying a dozen people on his back, his smile a sunbeam in the midst of disaster. Fear not! Why? Because I am here! The video boomed. Izuku stood in the doorway, a small silhouette against the heroic light. He turned to his mother, his body trembling, a single tear tracing a path through the faint freckles on his cheek. He raised a shaky finger toward the screen. Mom! His voice was a tiny, fractured thing. Can I be a hero too? Inko's heart shattered. She rushed to him, wrapping him in her arms and burying her face in his messy green hair. The tears she had been holding back finally broke free, hot and heavy. She couldn't bring herself to offer false hope, to lie to the trusting, broken heart of her son. I'm sorry, Izuku! She sobbed, her words muffled and thick with grief. I'm so sorry! Izuku didn't cry anymore. He just stood there, wrapped in his mother's sorrow, feeling the cold, empty static where his symphony was supposed to be. He didn't understand then that his mother was apologizing for his broken dream. In that moment, it felt like she was apologizing for his very existence. The years that followed were painted in shades of that initial gray. The world, once a place of infinite possibility, became a landscape of limitations. Quirkless, the word became a brand, seared onto his identity by the fiery explosions of his childhood friend, Katsuki Bakugo. You're just a useless Deku! Bakugo would sneer, his palms popping with miniature detonations, the smell of burnt sugar hanging in the air. You can't do anything! The other children, a constellation of minor powers orbiting Bakugo's explosive sun, would laugh and jeer. To them, Izuku was an anomaly, a relic, a thing to be pitted and pushed aside. The strange resilience that had puzzled Dr. Tsubasa became Izuku's silent companion. One afternoon at the playground, Bakugo, in a fit of pique over a misplaced All Might card, shoved him hard. Izuku tumbled backward, his knee scraping raw against the sharp gravel. Pain, hot and immediate, flared up his leg. His eyes welled with tears, but he bit his lip, refusing to give Bakugo the satisfaction of a sob. See? You're so weak you can't even stand up! Bakugo crowed before marching off with his lackeys, triumphant. Izuku sat there for a long time, watching a line of blood well up from the shredded skin. He felt the familiar sting, the ache, but underneath it, there was a strange sense of detachment, a deep, quiet calm. Later that day, at home, Inko clucked her tongue and went to fetch the first aid kit. Stay right there, sweetie, I'll get a bandage for that nasty. She trailed off as she returned, kneeling before him. Izuku looked down. The bleeding had long since stopped. The angry red gash from only an hour ago was already knitting itself shut, a dark, clean scab forming over the wound with impossible speed. Oh, Inko said, her brow furrowed. Well, that's good. You kids certainly do heal fast. She brushed it off, a mother's convenient explanation for a minor oddity. But Izuku felt it. He felt the faint, imperceptible warmth under his skin, a quiet hum of cellular activity that was just a little too efficient, a little too fast. It was another anomaly, another whisper in the static of his existence. The most profound oddities, however, came at night. His dreams were not the disjointed, nonsensical fantasies of a normal child. They were recurring, vivid, and achingly real. The dream always began the same way, falling. He was falling from an impossible height, through a sky that wasn't blue but a vast, endless sea of stars. Nebulae swirled around him in silent, majestic curtains of cosmic dust. Galaxies spun like diamond-dusted pinwheels in the distance. There was no sound, only the immense, terrifying pressure of the void, and the eyes. The sky was filled with them. They weren't physical eyes, but celestial bodies that stared with cold, silent judgment. A pair of binary stars burned with accusatory heat. A black hole gazed with an all-consuming emptiness. A distant galaxy cluster watched with a billion points of indifferent light. They were his creators, his peers, his betrayers. He knew this with a certainty that transcended memory. The dream was always steeped in a sorrow so profound it felt like a physical weight, a sense of loss that dwarfed his own childish heartbreak over being quirkless. It was the grief of a creator for their creation, the anguish of a champion abandoned, the loneliness of an eternity spent in silent descent. He would wake up with his pillow damp, not from sweat, but from tears shed for a life he couldn't remember and a crime he didn't understand. He was grieving for a fallen god, never realizing that the god was himself. This cosmic sorrow manifested in his waking life as a strange, overwhelming empathy. He felt the world's pain as a low-frequency hum beneath his own. One day, he found a sparrow on the sidewalk, its wing bent at an unnatural angle. As he gently cupped the tiny, trembling creature in his hands, he was flooded with its terror, its searing pain. It was so intense that his own wingless shoulders ached in sympathy, and he began to cry, his tears falling onto the bird's ruffled feathers. He sat there for an hour, whispering soothing nonsense, feeling the bird's panic slowly subside into a dull, pained exhaustion. It wasn't just sympathy. It was a shared experience, a sliver of his soul connecting to the inner spark, the life force, of another being. This was the nature of Promethyl, the forgotten champion of humanity. The god who had gifted mortals the very spark of potential that would one day become quirks, and who was cast down for it. His essence, dormant and shattered within the quirkless boy, still resonated with the world he had sacrificed everything for. Izuku Midoriya, the boy who felt nothing but static within himself, was unknowingly tuned to the symphony of every other soul on the planet. 10 years passed. 10 years of notebooks filled with hero analysis, of enduring the nickname Deku, of chasing a dream everyone told him was impossible. At 14, he was still the same hopeful, empathetic boy, albeit with a more pronounced stoop to his shoulders, as if carrying the weight of a decade of disappointment. It was on his way home from another demoralizing day at Aldera Junior High, his ears still ringing with Bakugo's latest explosive tirade. "Don't even think of applying to UA, you damn nerd!" That, the world shifted again. He was walking through an underpass, trying to mentally dissect the quirk of the hero empty lady, when a disgusting, gurgling sound echoed from a nearby manhole cover. Before he could react, a monstrous wave of green, viscous sludge erupted from the sewer, two malevolent yellow eyes bobbing in the semi-liquid horror. "A medium-sized invisibility cloak!" The sludge villain gurgled, its voice a wet rasp. "You'll do perfectly!" Terror, cold and absolute, seized him. His legs froze. The sludge slammed into him, a suffocating, putrid tide. It forced its way into his mouth, his nose, a living drowning. His lungs burned. His frantic scrabbling did nothing against the fluid body of the villain. "I'm dying," he thought, his vision starting to tunnel. But as the filth tried to possess his body, something deep within him, something ancient and pure, recoiled. It was a primal, instinctual rejection. His soul, the dormant core of a fallen god, recognized this invasive presence as anathema, a corruption. A flicker of warmth, too faint to be called power, pulsed in his chest, a silent, divine no. Suddenly, the manhole cover he just passed clanged open, shot into the air by a tremendous force. "Have no fear, you are safe!" A voice boomed, a sound Izuku knew better than his own heartbeat. "Now that I am here, that is!" All Might stood there, his iconic smile blazing, grocery bag still clutched in one hand. Texas smash! The air pressure from the punch was a physical thing, a hurricane confined to the underpass. It tore the sludge villain apart, splattering it against the concrete walls. Izuku fell to the ground, gasping, coughing up grime, his body shaking uncontrollably. The last thing he saw before his vision swam was his hero, his god, standing over him, backlit by the afternoon sun. When he came to, All Might was lightly tapping his cheek. "Hey! Thought we lost you there." Izuku's mind rebooted, and the fanbot took over. He scrambled for his notebook, a frantic, jumbled stream of awe and gratitude pouring out of him. All Might, ever the gracious hero, signed it with a flourish, but his smile was strained. He was clutching his side, his time limit ticking away. Driven by a desperation he didn't fully understand, Izuku did the stupidest, most reckless thing in his life. He grabbed onto All Might's leg as the hero leaped into the air. What followed was a terrifying, wind-blasted flight and a clumsy landing on a nearby rooftop. It was there that the third great shift in Izuku's life occurred. As All Might lectured him on the dangers of his recklessness, a horrifying transformation began. Steam poured from the hero's body like a broken radiator. The mountain of muscle deflated, shrinking away to reveal a skeletal man with sunken cheeks, sharp, angular bones, and eyes that seemed too big for his skull. Blood trickled from the corner of his mouth. Izuku stared, his fanbowl world crumbling to dust for the second time in his life. But this time, the feeling wasn't just shock or disillusionment. As he looked at this broken, withered man, this hero who had been a symbol of unbreakable strength, he was hit by a wave of emotion so powerful it buckled his knees. It was a deep, ancient, and sorrowful pity. It was not the condescending pity of the strong for the weak. It was an empathy that resonated in the very core of his being. He saw the gaping, horrific wound on the hero's side, a permanent twilight of a man's former glory. He saw the exhaustion etched into every line on his face, the pain that was a constant companion behind his brilliant smile. He saw a champion who had poured every ounce of his magnificent power, his very life force, into a thankless world, burning himself down to a flickering ember to keep others warm. In that moment, Izuku felt the echo of Promethel. The sorrow of giving a gift of fire, only to be chained to a rock and punished for it. He saw in All Might a kindred spirit, a fellow sacrifice on the altar of humanity. The static in his soul resonated with the hero's pain, a mournful dirge for a light that was fading. He gave so much, Izuku whispered, the thought echoing with the weight of millennia. Too much. He's hollowed himself out for them. All Might explained the injury, the time limit, the truth behind the smile. And then Izuku, his own dream feeling so small and selfish in the face of this man's immense sacrifice, asked the question that had defined his entire existence. Even without a quirk, can I be a hero? The answer was what he expected, what every logical part of his mind knew to be true. No. All Might told him to be realistic, to become a police officer or a doctor. It was kind, practical advice, and it was the final nail in the coffin of his dream. Izuku walked home in a daze, the hero's pragmatic words a death knell in his ears. The world was muted, colorless. The static was back, louder than ever. Then, a familiar explosion rocked the street ahead. A crowd had gathered. A villain, the same sludge villain, All Might must have dropped the bottles, had taken another hostage. He pushed his way to the front. The scene was chaos. Heroes were holding back, their quirks useless against the villain's fluid body. And in the center of that swirling green monstrosity, thrashing and suffocating, were two terrified, explosive eyes. Bakugo. Their eyes met for a fraction of a second. In that glance, Izuku saw past the bully, past the arrogance. He saw a terrified 14-year-old boy who was going to die, and the empathy, that overwhelming, divine curse, surged through him. He felt Bakugo's searing panic, his rage turning to fear, his desperate struggle for air. Before he knew what he was doing, his legs were moving. He ran past the police line, past the stunned heroes. He wasn't thinking. He was acting on an instinct far older than himself, the instinct to protect, to save, to throw oneself into the fire for another. He threw his backpack, a feeble distraction, and clawed at the sludge, trying to free his friend, his tormentor. It was useless, but it was something. It was an act of pure, selfless heroism. It was enough to shame a hero. A skeletal hand gripped a nearby railing. Pathetic, Toshinori Yagi thought, before his body swelled with muscle and righteous fire. I really am pathetic! All Might roared, his true form returned for a few precious seconds. Detroit smash! The punch changed the weather. The villain was obliterated. Rain began to fall. Later, after the heroes had praised Bakugo for his bravery and scolded Izuku for his recklessness, he was walking home alone, the weight of the day finally settling on him. I am here! The voice boomed from around the corner. All Might, in his muscle form, skidded to a stop before him. And then he deflated again, steam hissing into the twilight air. Young man, Toshinori Yagi said, his voice quiet but intense. I came to thank you, and to apologize. But also, to ask you a question. He looked at Izuku, at the boy who had run into danger with nothing but a school bag and a desperate heart. When you ran in, what were you thinking? Izuku looked down, tears welling again. I don't know. My legs, They just started moving. I saw his face, and it looked like he was asking for help. Toshinori's hollow cheeks curved into a real, genuine smile. He saw it then. The true mark of a hero wasn't a powerful quirk or a flashy costume. It was the spirit, the selfless, instinctual drive to save others, even at great personal cost. He thought of all the great heroes he had known. He thought of his master, Nana Shimura, who had told him that a hero is someone who meddles in other people's business when it's not asked of them. This boy, this quirkless, crying, pathetic in his own eyes boy, embodied that spirit more than anyone he had ever met. You told me you didn't have a quirk, Toshinori said, his voice filled with a newfound conviction. So when I saw this timid, quirkless boy jump into action, it inspired me. The top heroes all have stories from their school days. Most of their stories have one thing in common. Their bodies moved before they had a chance to think. He took a step forward, his shadow falling over Izuku. That's what happened to you, isn't it? Izuku looked up, his face a mess of tears and confusion. He nodded, unable to speak. Toshinori's smile widened. He spread his arms, a grand, theatrical gesture that was pure all-might, even in this withered form. He said the words that would change not only Izuku's life, but the very fabric of his soul. You can be a hero. The words were not just a validation. They were a detonation. They were a key, forged in the fires of heroic sacrifice, turning in a lock that had been rusted shut for millennia. For the first time in his life, the static in Izuku's soul cleared. For a single, silent, crystalline moment, he felt it. The vast, sleeping power within him stirred. It was like a sleeping sun, its corona flaring for a fraction of a second in response to the call. The overwhelming emptiness was filled with a sudden, brilliant warmth that spread from the center of his chest, a single, perfect note of a forgotten symphony. In the fading light of dusk, All Might blinked. For just a moment, he could have sworn he saw the boy's irises, those deep green pools of tears and determination, flicker. A faint, imperceptible, but undeniably golden light swirled within them, like sunlight catching on ancient, polished metal. It was gone as quickly as it appeared, a trick of the light, perhaps, but Izuku felt it. He felt the turning of the key, the stirring of a dormant purpose, the first crack in the seal of a fallen god. He fell to his knees, sobbing, but these were not the tears of sorrow he had cried his whole life. They were tears of catharsis, of hope, of a beginning. He did not know what was happening inside him. He only knew that for the first time, he was not just Izuku Midoriya, the quirkless boy. He was something more. His journey to become a hero had just begun, but the journey to remember who, and what, he truly was starting right alongside it. The unremembered sky was finally showing its first, faint glimmer of dawn. The dawn that broke over Dagoba Municipal Beach Park was a dirty, hazy thing, filtered through the smog of the city and the stench of decay. For 10 long months, this became Izuku Midoriya's world. The beach was less a coastline and more a man-made mountain range of forgotten things, rusted husks of cars, mountains of tangled fishing nets, soggy piles of discarded appliances, and a universe of plastic trash that had been compressed by time and tied into a foul, solid landscape. It was a monument to societal neglect, a festering wound on the edge of the ocean. And it was to be his crucible. This is it, my boy, Toshinori Yagi announced, his voice a little too loud in the quiet morning air. In his skeletal form, he looked frail against the backdrop of industrial waste, a scarecrow presiding over a junkyard. Your body is not yet ready to inherit my power. It's an open flame, and right now you're a dry twig. You'd combust from the inside out. So, we need to turn you into a proper vessel. A sturdy chalice fit to hold the hopes of generations. He gestured to the landfill with a theatrical sweep of his arm. Your task is simple. Clean this entire section of the beach before the UE entrance exam in 10 months. Izuku stared, his jaw slack. The scale of the task was geological. It wasn't cleaning, it was excavation. All of this? He squeaked, his voice barely a whisper against the cawing of a distant seagull. Every last bit. Toshinori confirmed, his grin wide and a little manic. He slapped a thick, stapled sheaf of papers into Izuku's hands. This is my custom design aimed to pass. American Dream Plan. It details everything from your workout regimen and sleep schedule to your diet. Follow it to the letter, and you'll not only build the necessary muscle, you'll be in peak physical condition for the exam. The first few weeks were a special kind of hell. Every muscle in Izuku's body screamed in protest. His alarm would blare at 5 a.m., and he would drag his aching limbs out of bed, his body feeling like a collection of bruised fruit. He would haul tires until his arms felt like limp noodles, drag refrigerators whose rusted corners tore at his palms, and fill wheelbarrows with debris until his back was a single, solid knot of pain. He would collapse into bed each night, too exhausted to even dream, and wake up feeling as though he'd been run over by a truck. Toshinori was a relentless, if unorthodox, mentor. He'd perch atop a broken-down washing machine, shouting encouragement and critiques. "More grit, my boy!" The greats didn't build their legends by taking it easy. Feel the burn and embrace it. But about a month into the training, both mentor and student began to notice the subtle anomalies. It started with the calluses. Izuku's hands, which had been a raw, blistered mess for the first 2 weeks, began to heal with an unnatural swiftness. One evening, a particularly nasty blister on his palm tore open, a bloody, painful wound. He winced, cleaned it as best he could, and expected it to sting for days. The next morning, it was not only sealed shut but had already formed a tough, leathery callus in its place. "Remarkable resilience," Toshinori noted, examining the boy's hands. "Your body seems to be adapting at an incredible rate. That's the heroic spirit for you. It pushes the body beyond its understood limits." Then came the stamina. According to the American Dream Plan, Izuku should have been hitting a plateau, needing a recovery day. Instead, he was accelerating. The mornings he woke up feeling like a truck had hit him became less frequent. The deep, soul-crushing exhaustion was replaced by a persistent, manageable ache. He was still pushing his limits, but the limits themselves were expanding faster than Toshinori's charts predicted. One sweltering afternoon, they were faced with a particularly monstrous piece of junk, an old, industrial-grade freezer, half buried in the sand and fused with rust. It was a two-man job, at least. "All right, young Midoriya, we'll just focus on digging this one out today," Toshinori said, wiping sweat from his brow. "No sense in you trying to move it alone, you'll throw your back out." But Izuku, fueled by a surge of determination and something else, a low, humming warmth in his core he was beginning to associate with exertion, set his stance. He gripped the rusted edge, his sneakers digging into the sand. He took a deep breath, and pulled. Muscles that should have torn merely screamed. Bones that should have creaked under the strain held firm. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a groan of protesting metal and the sickening sound of sand and rust giving way, the freezer lurched. He dragged it, inch by agonizing inch, a full 10 feet before his strength gave out and he collapsed, gasping, onto the sand. Toshinori stared, his jaw agape. He had calculated the weight, the leverage, the sheer physics of it. It shouldn't have been possible. Not for a boy of Izuku's size and current muscle development. He quickly masked his shock with a booming laugh. "Ha! Astounding! See what pure grit can accomplish. You're a natural, my boy. A true natural." But later, as he watched Izuku diligently sorting scrap metal, Toshinori's smile faded. He had trained Nana Shimura. He had seen what peak human potential looked like. This was different. The boy wasn't just determined. He was unnaturally robust. It was as if his body had a hidden reservoir of energy, a deeper well of fortitude that it drew from when pushed to the absolute brink. Toshinori, in his unwavering belief in the human spirit, chalked it up to Izuku being a once-in-a-generation prodigy of willpower. The truth, that he was witnessing the first stirrings of a divine engine being coaxed back to life by mortal effort, was beyond his comprehension. Izuku felt it too, though he couldn't articulate it. He felt the static in his soul, once a symbol of his emptiness, had changed. It was no longer a void. It was now like the hum of a colossal, sleeping machine, and his grueling labor was the slow, steady crank that was bringing it to life. He wasn't just building a vessel of muscle and bone. He was reinforcing the very foundations of his soul, preparing the mortal chalice for a power far grander and more ancient than One for All. On the morning of the UA entrance exam, the beach was pristine. The rising sun cast a golden sheen across a stretch of clean, reclaimed sand. The air smelled of salt and possibility. Izuku stood atop the last remaining pile of scrap, a broken-down van, and roared at the dawn, a cry of triumph and exhaustion. He was no longer the skinny, stooped boy from 10 months ago. His frame was lean but corded with hard-earned muscle, his posture straight, his eyes burning with a new, quiet fire. Tashinori, now in his all-might form, beamed with pride. "Excellent work! Oh my goodness! You even cleaned beyond the area I assigned! You truly went plus ultra!" Izuku slid down from the van, his body trembling with adrenaline. I did it, All Might. You did, my boy. And now for your reward." All Might plucked a single strand of his golden hair. "My master told me, there's a difference between what you're given and what you earn. You have earned this, young Midoriya. You have earned the right to inherit my power." He held out the strand of hair. "Now eat this." Izuku's triumphant expression melted into one of utter confusion. "Huh! To inherit my power, you have to ingest some of my DNA. That's how it works." All Might insisted, unfazed. "Now hurry! We're running out of time before the exam." With a sense of profound anticlimax, Izuku took the strand of hair. It felt normal. Just a hair. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and swallowed. For a moment, there was nothing but the slightly weird feeling of having eaten a piece of his idol's hair. Then, the universe inside him cracked open. It did not begin in his stomach. It began in his soul. The moment All Might's DNA, the carrier of One for All, was processed by his system, it wasn't just a quirk being transferred. It was a key of unimaginable power being inserted into a lock of cosmic scale. The first sensation was a blinding, internal light. The humming static in his core erupted into a roaring inferno. A supernova detonated behind his eyes. He screamed, clutching his chest as a torrent of energy, raw and untamed, flooded his entire being. It was a force of nature, a river of power built from 8 generations of stockpiling, and it slammed directly into the ancient, divine seal that had kept his true nature dormant for 15 years. It was a collision of myth and mortality. He saw them, ghostly, fleeting images of the past wielders of One for All. A man with black hair and a determined scowl. A woman with a kind smile and a beauty mark, her hand outstretched. A bald man with goggles. 7 figures, flickering like constellations in a storm, their collective will and power surging into him. But behind them, through them, was another vision, infinitely more vast and terrifying. It was the dream, but it was no longer a dream. He was falling again, from the sea of stars. He saw the celestial thrones, now empty and cold. He felt the profound, soul-shattering betrayal from the silent, judging eyes of the cosmos. He felt the agony of his divine form being shattered, his power sealed, his memory scoured, his very essence poured into the fragile, repeating cycle of human reincarnation. The dormant golden energy, the core of the fallen god Promethel, met the crackling green lightning of One for All. They didn't merge. They collided. A dam of starlight, built millennia ago, finally broke under the pressure of the heroic quirk. Arrgh! The scream was torn from his throat, raw and inhuman. His body convulsed, green sparks and faint, almost invisible threads of gold light erupting from his skin. "My boy! Young Midoriya!" All Might yelled, his face a mask of panic. He had expected some discomfort, a fever perhaps, but not this. This was violent. This was wrong. For Izuku, it was the most excruciating and yet most complete sensation of his life. It was the pain of a dislocated bone being snapped back into its socket, magnified a billionfold. It was the agony of his very soul being unchained, unlocked, and forcibly reforged. He felt like a hollow vessel that was suddenly, violently, filled to overflowing. The emptiness that had defined him was gone, replaced by 2 warring, immense powers. Then, as quickly as it began, it was over. He collapsed to his knees, panting, sweat pouring down his face. The world swam back into focus. He felt different. He felt a hum under his skin, a low thrumming power that was both foreign and deeply, intimately familiar. It was One for All, a crackling, energetic presence, and beneath it, a deeper, calmer, an infinitely more powerful wellspring of quiet, golden warmth. He was no longer a boy with a void inside him. He was a vessel containing a legacy, and a prison containing a god. "Are you all right?" Toshinori knelt beside him, his concern palpable. Izuku could only nod, his throat too raw to speak. He pushed himself to his feet, his legs shaking. "The exam," he rasped. "I'm going to be late." He made it to the UA entrance exam with minutes to spare, his mind still reeling. The power inside him was a chaotic, buzzing thing, completely unresponsive to his will. He felt like he'd been given the keys to a fighter jet with no instruction manual. The written exam was a blur. The practical exam began, and he was thrown into a massive, artificial cityscape with hundreds of other hopefuls. As the gates opened and everyone surged forward, Izuku was left standing at the starting line, paralyzed by the sheer, overwhelming presence of the power thrumming in his limbs. He felt like a fraud. He hadn't even managed to throw a single punch with it. He spent the next several minutes running, dodging, and accomplishing absolutely nothing. He had 0 points. The despair was a cold, familiar weight in his stomach. Was it all for nothing? The beach, the training. Then he heard a cry of pain. He turned to see the girl with the kind round face, the one who had stopped him from tripping earlier, pinned under a slab of concrete. And looming over her, casting a shadow that blotted out the sun, was the 0-pointer. The arena trap robot. It was a mechanical titan, a skyscraper of green metal and menace, its single red eye glowing with malevolent intent. Everyone else was running away. The logical part of Izuku's brain screamed for him to join them. But then he saw the girl's terrified face, the tears welling in her eyes. And that ancient, heroic instinct, the one that had sent him running toward the sludge villain, took over. She's going to die. His legs moved before he could think. He sprinted toward the colossal machine, his mind a whirlwind. What do I do? What did All Might say? Clench your butt cheeks and yell this from the bottom of your heart. He channeled everything he had into his legs, the 10 months of grueling training, the desperation to prove himself, the burning need to save someone right in front of him. He leaped. The power of one for all surged from his core, an untamed green lightning that answered his selfless call. But it wasn't alone. As his desperation peaked, as he offered up his own body for the sake of another, the divine energy within him resonated. The golden warmth, the power of Promethyl, the god of sacrifice, flared in sympathy. From the ground, it was just a boy making an impossible jump. From Izuku's perspective, it was something more. For a split second, he saw the green lightning of one for all not as simple energy, but as a river, and flowing within that river were shimmering, almost invisible threads of pure, molten gold. He drew back his fist, channeling the chaotic storm into a single point. He wasn't thinking about percentages or control. He was thinking about saving her. Smash! The impact was apocalyptic. His fist connected with the robot's faceplate, and the world dissolved into light and sound. It wasn't just a punch, it was a detonation. The force was immense, incomprehensible. The 0-pointer's head crumpled inward like a tin can, and a concussive shockwave erupted from the point of impact, blowing out windows and the surrounding buildings. A peal of silent, spiritual thunder rolled across the battlefield, a ripple in the fabric of reality that every person with a sensitive quirk felt as a sudden, inexplicable chill. The robot, all 10 stories of it, reeled backward and collapsed into a mountain of scrap. The recoil was just as catastrophic. The untamed power, far too much for his unprepared body, surged back through his arm. He felt a series of sickening, wet cracks. His right arm shattered in a dozen places. The bones in his legs, which had taken the strain of the jump, fractured from the sheer force of the blowback. Pain, white-hot and absolute, flooded his senses. But as he began to fall, helpless, from 50 feet in the air, a strange thing happened. From within the mangled ruin of his arm and legs, a faint, warm, golden light began to glow. It was an instinctual, frantic response from his divine core. He could feel it, even through the haze of agony, a desperate attempt to mend what was broken, to knit bone back to flesh, to restore the vessel. It felt like warm honey flooding his shattered limbs, trying to piece together a broken plate. It was too little, too late. The physical trauma was too overwhelming. The golden light flickered and died out as his consciousness faded, the pain pulling him under into a welcoming darkness just before the kind-faced girl saved him from hitting the ground with a slap and a surge of her quirk. Izuku awoke to the smell of disinfectant and the bright, sterile light of the Yue infirmary. An old woman with gray hair and a tight bun, a large syringe for a cane, and a doctor's coat stood over him. Recovery girl. "Oh good, you're awake," she said, her voice surprisingly gentle. "You gave us all quite a scare, young man. Both your legs and your right arm were completely shattered. It's a miracle you didn't lose them." Izuku tried to sit up, a groan escaping his lips. His limbs felt heavy and sore, but whole. You healed me? That's what I do," she said with a small smile. "My quirk, heal, amplifies and speeds up a person's own natural healing ability. It uses up their own stamina, which is why you feel so exhausted. Now hold still." She leaned forward and planted a soft, grandmotherly kiss on his forehead. Izuku felt a wave of warmth spread through him, a pleasant, soothing sensation that chased away the last of the deep, aching pain, but Recovery Girl's smile instantly vanished. She pulled back, her eyes wide with shock, her hand flying to her own lips. A profound confusion washed over her features. What was that?" she whispered, more to herself than to him. "Is something wrong?" Izuku asked, his voice laced with worry. She stared at him, truly seeing him for the first time. Her expert senses, honed over decades of healing thousands of different bodies and interacting with countless quirks, had just told her something impossible. When she used her quirk, she felt the flow of the patient's life force, their energy, their healing factor. She had felt Izuku's, and it was vigorous, strong, no doubt thanks to his intense physical training. But there had been something else. As her quirk activated his biological healing, it had brushed against a second, completely separate energy source within him. It was a vast, deep, and utterly alien wellspring of power. It wasn't biological. It wasn't a quirk factor. It was pure, refined, life-giving energy, ancient and serene, like tapping into a hidden, subterranean sun. Her quirk hadn't even been able to touch it, merely skirt its edges. But she had felt its immense, quiet presence. It was the energy of creation, a power that didn't just mend but restored from a perfect, original blueprint. It was the same energy that had feebly tried to heal him as he fell. She had seen boys with self-healing quirks. She had healed All Might himself. She had never, in her entire career, felt anything remotely like this. It was like comparing a candle to a star. She composed herself, her professional demeanor snapping back into place, but her eyes held a new, searching intensity. She looked at this boy, this earnest, freckled boy who had broken himself to save a stranger, and saw not a reckless student, but a profound and dangerous anomaly. She patted his hand, her touch now hesitant. "No, dear. Everything is fine. You just rest." As she walked back to her office, she couldn't shake the feeling. The sheer, primordial power she had sensed, it defied all known science, all understanding of quirks. She had thought him a reckless, late-blooming powerhouse, another All Might in the making. But now she knew better. Leaning against her desk, her heart still beating a little too fast, Chio Shizenji came to a startling, unnerving conclusion. "This boy," she murmured to the empty room, her voice heavy with a dawning awe and a sliver of fear, "is not just a late bloomer." The first day at Yue High School felt like stepping into a dream. Izuku walked through the colossal gates, his heart a frantic drum against his ribs, the sheer reality of it all threatening to overwhelm him. This was the hallowed ground where All Might had walked, the forge that had shaped countless heroes. And he, Izuku Midoriya, the boy who was once just a quirkless, weeping fan, was now a student. He clutched the strap of his yellow backpack, the weight of his notebooks a familiar comfort in this new, intimidating world. He found his way to Class 1A, the massive door a clear statement of the school's larger-than-life ethos. Inside, he was met with the sight of Katsuki Bakugo clashing with the stern, blue-haired boy from the entrance exam, Tenya Ida. The air was already crackling with the energy of 20 ambitious, powerful teenagers, a cacophony of burgeoning egos and nervous excitement. Izuku felt a familiar pang of inadequacy, a quiet voice whispering that he didn't belong here, that he was an imposter who had fluked his way in with a single, self-destructive punch. Then the kind-faced girl, Achiko Uraraka, greeted him with a beaming smile, and the feeling subsided, replaced by a warm, nervous flutter. Maybe, just maybe, he could find his place here. Their homeroom teacher, a man who looked like he just crawled out of a sleeping bag and hadn't slept in a week, introduced himself as Shota Aizawa. His introduction was brisk, cynical, and culminated in him herding them all out to the training grounds for a quirk apprehension test. "You've been taking standardized tests your whole lives," Aizawa drawled, his voice a monotone of pure exhaustion. "But you've never been allowed to use your quirks. It's not rational. Today, you'll push your abilities to their limits." One by one, his classmates demonstrated their incredible powers. A girl who could create objects out of her skin. A boy with a tail. Todoroki Shoto, the son of the number 2 hero, Endeavor, who encased half the field in a glacier with a casual stomp of his foot. Bakugo launched a softball into the stratosphere with a thunderous explosion, scoring over 700 meters. The sheer level of talent was breathtaking and terrifying. Izuku felt the two powers churning within him. One for all was a live wire, a barely contained storm of green energy just beneath his skin. Beneath that, the golden energy was a deep, calm ocean, vast and unmoving. He still had no conscious control over either. His performance in the other tests, the 50-meter dash, the long jump, the grip strength test, had been depressingly average, a testament to his 10 months of physical training but nothing more. He hadn't dared to tap into the power that had shattered his body. Finally, it was his turn for the softball throw. This was it. The test that most resembled the punch that got him here. He stepped up to the circle, the ball feeling heavy and alien in his hand. "Midoriya, right?" Aizawa's voice was flat. "Whatever you're planning, hurry it up. You're holding up the class." Izuku took a deep breath. He remembered All Might's advice, whispered to him in a hurried phone call the night before: focus the power on a single point, just one part of your body. Don't let it flood your entire system. He channeled the crackling green energy into his right index finger, trying to contain the hurricane in a teacup. He could feel the power building, his finger glowing with a faint red light as the energy strained against the confines of his skin. He reared back, ready to throw, ready to prove he belonged. Suddenly, a crippling pressure washed over him. His hair stood on end, and the crackling power in his finger fizzled out, extinguished as if by a bucket of cold water. He looked up to see Aizawa glaring at him, his black hair floating around his head, his eyes burning with a terrifying crimson light. A gray, scarf-like capture weapon writhed around his neck like a living thing. "I erased your quirk," Aizawa stated, his voice dangerously low. "A foolish move, trying to use the same self-destructive attack from the entrance exam. Are you planning on becoming a hero who needs to be saved after every single move? You'd be a liability on the battlefield, useless after one attack." The word useless struck Izuku like a physical blow, a ghost of Bakugo's sneering voice. "You don't have what it takes to be here," Aizawa continued, the red glow in his eyes unwavering. He was trying to break him, to see if he would shatter under the pressure. "Your potential is zero." For a moment, Izuku's world crumbled. The doubt, the fear, the imposter syndrome, it all came crashing back. He was just a quirkless Deku playing with a borrowed power he couldn't even control. Aizawa was right. He was useless. But then, something else rose up to meet the despair. It wasn't a memory of All Might's encouragement. It wasn't a surge of heroic determination. It was a deep, resonant, and ancient indignation. The quiet, golden ocean within him stirred. A ripple of defiance, born of an eon of forgotten pride, disturbed its placid surface. The essence of Promethyl, the champion who had defied an entire pantheon for the sake of potential, would not suffer the word zero. It was a flicker of a feeling, a ghost of an emotion that was not entirely his own, but it was enough. It was the spark that ignited his own spirit. "No," Izuku thought, his head snapping up, his eyes meeting Aizawa's glare. "No, you're wrong." Aizawa's eyes widened slightly. For a split second, as his erasure quirk was focused on nullifying one for all, he felt something else. A phantom pressure, a whisper of immense power that his quirk couldn't quite grasp, like trying to catch smoke in a net. It was the faintest trace of the golden energy, a power that wasn't a quirk factor, and thus existed outside the realm of his ability. He blinked, and the sensation was gone. I'm returning your quirk, Aizawa said, the glow in his eyes fading. You have one more chance. Show me you're not a lost cause. Izuku stepped back into the circle, his mind racing. He's right. I can't destroy my whole arm. But I can't afford to get zero either. He clutched the ball, remembering All Might's advice. One single point, the very tip of my finger. The last point of contact. He channeled One for All again. This time, he didn't try to fill his whole arm. He focused the raging river of power into a single, infinitesimal point, the very tip of his right index finger. He felt the incredible strain, the pressure building to an explosive crescendo. He swung his arm, and at the precise moment of release, he let the power go. Smash! The crack of displaced air was like a rifle shot. The ball rocketed forward, a green comet against the blue sky, leaving a spiraling contrail behind it. A shockwave, far smaller than the one from the entrance exam but still potent, blasted outward from his fingertip. The result was twofold. First, the incredible, bone-shattering recoil was focused on a single digit. His index finger turned a grotesque, swollen purple, clearly broken. The pain was sharp and blinding, but it was contained. His arm was fine. The rest of his body was fine. Second, as the power surged through him, as his will and desperation merged with the energy of One for All, it happened again. His consciousness was flung from his body. The world of the training grounds dissolved. He was no longer a boy standing in a throwing circle. He was adrift in a vast, silent, and unfamiliar space. It was not the star-filled void of his dreams. This was a different place entirely. A realm of deep, swirling nebula, a cosmos of purple and black shot through with veins of emerald green. It was a place of profound silence, a pocket dimension that felt both ancient and alive. And he was not alone. Before him, seated on simple, throne-like chairs that seemed to be carved from solidified shadow, were 7 figures. They were translucent, spectral, like ghosts made of starlight. He recognized them instantly, with a knowledge that wasn't his own, as the previous wielders of One for All. One of them, a woman with long, flowing white hair and a kind, sad smile, rose from her seat. A single beauty mark was visible beneath her eye. Nana Shimura. Her form flickered, a celestial projection struggling to maintain its shape in the face of the new, overwhelming presence that was Izuku. Hello, Ninth, she said, her voice not a sound, but a thought that echoed directly in his mind. It was a voice filled with a mixture of awe, reverence, and profound confusion. We have been waiting for the vessel to become strong enough to see us. Izuku floated, stunned into silence. He tried to speak, but he had no mouth, no voice. He was a disembodied point of consciousness. Another figure, a man with a severe face and a jagged scar over his eye, spoke next, his mental voice sharp and analytical. The power has reached the singularity. It has grown too strong, too vast. It has begun to manifest the wills of those who cultivated it. That is why we are here. That is why you are here. But Nana Shimura's gaze was fixed on something beyond Izuku's conscious self. She was looking at the core of his being, at the dormant god within. But we did not expect this, she continued, her voice trembling with an emotion that Izuku couldn't decipher. It was like fear and worship intertwined. The court chose you, Ninth. It resonated with your heroic spirit. But it feels as if you are changing it. You are not just a vessel. You are an ocean into which our river now flows. The power is settling within you, but it is also being fundamentally altered by your very nature. The other vestiges murmured their agreement, a chorus of silent, spectral thoughts. They looked at him, their ghostly eyes seeing not just the boy, but the immense, sleeping sun of divine energy he carried within him. They had been prepared to guide a new wielder. They were not prepared to be the custodians of a reincarnated deity. The vestige realm, their collective mental space built within the core of One for All, was different for him. It was no longer a simple dark room with chairs, as it had been for All Might. For Izuku, it was a vast, cosmic nebula because his own soul was a cosmos in its own right. And at the very center of that nebula, a place even the vestiges couldn't get too close to, was a dim, sleeping, golden sun, his own divine core, the sealed soul of Promethyl, now slowly steadily being awakened by the influx of one for all's power. Suddenly, a vision, sharp and painful, sliced through the strange communion. It was not a memory from the vestiges. It was one of his own, or rather, one of Promethel's. He stands in a hall of impossible scale, its walls crafted from woven light, its ceiling a living tapestry of galaxies. On a throne of polished silver sits a being of pure, blinding starlight, its form indistinct but its judgment absolute. Other celestial beings, their forms equally grand and terrible, stand as silent witnesses. You have broken the prime covenant. The voice from the throne booms, a sound that is both creation and destruction. You have given them the inner spark, the flame of potential. You have given our clay toys the means to become like us. They deserve the chance to build their own sky. Promethel's voice replies. It is Izuku's voice, yet it resonates with the age of the universe, filled with a defiant, loving compassion. Their potential should not be a cage. It should be a key. Your compassion is a betrayal. Your gift is a heresy. The throne declares. You championed them. Now you will fall with them. Your memory shall be scoured, your power sealed, your essence bound to their fleeting, mortal cycle. You will be forgotten, an anomaly in the static of their short lives, until the world you so love no longer has need of you. A feeling of profound betrayal, sharper than any physical pain, rips through him. The celestial beings turn their backs. The silver throne room dissolves, and he is falling from the sea of stars, his very being shattered into a billion pieces of forgotten light. Daria! Midoriya! The vision shattered. Izuku gasped, his consciousness slamming back into his body with the force of a physical blow. He was on his knees on the training field, his classmates staring at him with a mixture of shock and concern. His broken finger throbbed with excruciating pain. Aizawa stood over him, holding a small device. 705.3 meters. The teacher said, his voice betraying a hint of grudging respect. Not bad. He looked down at Izuku, his expression unreadable. You're still standing, and you managed to control the blowback somewhat? You're not a complete lost cause after all. Izuku barely heard him. His mind was reeling from the experience. The nebula. The vestiges. Nana Shimura's words. And the vision, the memory. It was so real, so vivid. The betrayal still echoed in his soul, a fresh wound atop an ancient scar. He had just received the first coherent whisper from his forgotten past. The rest of the day passed in a haze. A trip to Recovery Girl's office earned him a scolding and a healing kiss that left him feeling drained but whole. His finger was mended, but the memory of the vestige realm and the vision of the silver throne room was seared into his mind. He was quiet, lost in thought, even as his new friends, Ida and Iraraka, chatted with him on the walk to the train station. He was part of a class, he had friends, he was at his dream school, all the things he had ever wanted. But now, a new, terrifying, and monumental question had inserted itself into his life. What am I? That night, sleep did not come easy. He lay in his bed, staring at the All Might posters on his ceiling. They seemed childish now, relics from a simpler time when his biggest problem was being quirkless. He closed his eyes, concentrating, trying to find his way back to that strange, silent cosmos within himself. He focused on the hum of power under his skin, the duality of the crackling green storm and the calm golden sea. He let his consciousness drift, sinking past the immediate, energetic presence of One for All, reaching deeper into himself than ever before. And he found it. He was back in the nebula. The 7 spectral vestiges were there again, seated on their shadowy thrones. They watched him approach, their expressions unreadable constellations of light. This time, he was not a disembodied observer. He felt more solid, more present. He had a form, a ghostly projection of his own, and he could feel the groundless space beneath his feet. Nana Shimura floated forward once more. Her form seemed more stable this time, as if his second visit had allowed the realm to better acclimate to his presence. You have returned, Ninth. Her mental voice was softer this time, less confused and more inquisitive. You saw a fragment, did you not? A memory that is not of this world. Izuku found his own mental voice, a tentative thought directed at her. The throne room, the fall. Was that me? It was. Another vestige confirmed, a tall, thin man with pale hair. A memory buried deeper than any of our own. It is the bedrock upon which your soul is built. One for All did not create this space for you. It merely unlocked the door to a space that was already here, dormant within you. What does it mean? Izuku asked, the question a plea. Am I not human? Nana Shimura's expression was one of profound sympathy. You are Izuku Midoriya. You are human. But your soul is something far older. We do not have the answers you seek. We are but echoes, wills imprinted upon a quirk. You are the source. She pointed a translucent finger past him, toward the center of the vast nebula. The answers lie there. At the core. Izuku turned. In the distance, he saw it clearly now. It was a sun, not of fire and gas, but of pure, condensed golden energy. It was colossal, its surface swirling with slow, majestic flares. It was dim, as if sleeping, but its sheer presence was overwhelming. It radiated a feeling of immense age, of deep sorrow, and of limitless potential. It was the source of the quiet warmth he felt in his waking moments, the true nature of the anomaly in his soul. He felt an instinctual pull toward it, a homing beacon for his own fractured consciousness. At the same time, he felt a profound fear. To approach that sun felt like approaching the absolute truth of his own existence, a truth he wasn't sure he was ready for. What is that? He asked the vestiges, his mental voice trembling. It was the first wielder of One for All, the brother of the villain, who answered. His form was fainter than the others, but his will was the strongest. That is you. The original you, the being whose compassion was so great it birthed an age of wonders, and whose punishment was to forget. Izuku took a hesitant step toward the sleeping sun. With each step, he felt its presence grow stronger. He felt the echo of its emotions, the loneliness of its long imprisonment, the sorrow of its forgotten purpose, the deep, abiding love for the very idea of humanity. He was still miles away from it, a mere speck in the cosmic cathedral of his own soul, when its gentle, humming pulse seemed to intensify. A wave of warmth washed over him, not threatening, but welcoming, and with it came a single, clear, resonant word. A name, whispered on a solar wind across the chasm of his inner space. Promethyl. The name settled into his consciousness not as a piece of information, but as a fundamental truth. It was the name of the sleeping sun. It was the name of the fallen god from his dreams. It was his name. The revelation was too much. The fragile stability of his conscious projection shattered. The nebula, the vestiges, and the golden sun all dissolved, and he was flung back into his own sleeping body with a silent scream. He shot up in bed, drenched in a cold sweat, his heart hammering against his ribs. The name echoed in the silence of his room. Promethyl. He looked at his own hands, turning them over and over in the moonlight filtering through his window. They were the hands of a 14-year-old boy, scarred from 10 months of hard labor, one finger still slightly tender from being healed. But now he knew they were also the hands, however far removed, of something else. Something ancient, powerful, and fallen. The whispers had become a name. The static was beginning to resolve into a clear, terrifying signal. And Izuku Midoriya, the boy who just wanted to be a hero, was now faced with the impossible reality that he might also be a god. The path to becoming a hero had just become infinitely more complicated. The field trip to the unforeseen simulation joint, or USJ, was supposed to be a highlight of their first week. A sense of giddy excitement buzzed through the students of Class 1A as they boarded the bus. Izuku sat between Ida and Uraraka, trying to participate in the light-hearted banter about their quirks and hero costumes, but his mind was a turbulent sea. The name, Promethyl, was a constant, echoing whisper in the back of his consciousness. The vestige realm, with its spectral guides and the sleeping golden sun that was supposedly him, felt more real than the rumbling bus and the cheerful chatter of his friends. He kept flexing the fingers of his right hand, the one that had channeled the smash. He could still feel the phantom echo of the collision, the meeting of One for All's crackling green energy and the deeper, resonant hum of his own dormant power. He was sitting on a secret of cosmic proportions, a truth so immense and terrifying that it made the dream of becoming the next symbol of peace feel almost quaint. How could he focus on being a hero when he didn't even know what he was? The USJ was an architectural marvel, a colossal dome containing a variety of meticulously crafted environments, a shipwreck zone, a mountain range, a burning cityscape, a downpour area. It was a playground for heroes in training. The space hero, 13, was there to greet them, their bulky, astronaut-like suit a familiar sight from Hero News reports. I created this facility to prepare you for every type of disaster, 13 explained in their polite, synthesized voice. But remember, many of your quirks can be incredibly dangerous. They can easily be used to kill. This lesson is about learning to use your powers to save people. To be heroes of rescue, not just combat. The words resonated deeply with Izuku. To save people. That was the core of it all, wasn't it? That was the instinct that had driven him to run towards the sludge villain, to leap at the zero-pointer. It was the same compassionate impulse he had felt in the memory of Promethyl, the desire to give humanity a key to their own potential. For a moment, the two identities, boy and god, felt aligned, their purposes overlapping. But that moment of clarity was brutally shattered. The lights in the facility flickered and died. The central fountain sputtered and went still. A swirling dark purple mist, like a cancerous growth on the fabric of reality, bloomed in the center of the plaza below them. It warped, expanded, and from its shadowy depths people began to emerge, dozens of them. They were a motley collection of thugs and low-lives, their faces twisted in menacing grins, their bodies contorted by a grotesque variety of quirks. Stay together and don't move! Aizawa's voice cut through the students' confused murmurs, sharp and commanding. He pulled his yellow goggles over his eyes. 13, protect the students. This is real. They're villains. From the center of the encroaching mob, three figures stood out. One was the swirling vortex of mist itself, which coalesced into a vaguely humanoid shape with glowing yellow eyes. Another was a hulking, monstrous creature, its skin a dark, scarred purple, its brain gruesomely exposed, its eyes vacant and dead. It stood with an unnatural stillness, a bird-like beak its only facial feature. But it was the third figure that drew every eye, a man whose presence radiated a palpable aura of decay and petulant malice. He was thin, almost scrawny, his body draped in black. His face was obscured by a disembodied hand, its pale, dead fingers gripping his features like a macabre mask. More severed hands adorned his arms and neck. He scratched at his neck with a frantic, agitated energy, his posture a disturbing mix of childish restlessness and psychopathic intent. Where is he? The hand-covered man rasped, his voice like grinding sand. I went through all the trouble of bringing so many friends to say hello, and All Might, the symbol of peace, isn't even here. Maybe if we kill a few kids, he'll show up. The casual, gleeful threats sent a wave of genuine terror through the students. This wasn't a training exercise. This was an invasion. Aizawa didn't hesitate. He leaped from the platform, his capture weapon unfurling around him like a nest of gray serpents. He was a whirlwind of motion, a blur of black against the chaotic backdrop, his erasure quirk flickering from villain to villain. He moved with a brutal, practiced efficiency, nullifying quirks and incapacitating thugs with a combination of hand-to-hand combat and his versatile capture weapon. He was one man against 100, and for a terrifying, awe-inspiring moment, he was winning. We have to get out of here! Ida commanded, his student president instincts kicking in. 13, please get us to safety. But the purple mist villain, Kurojiri, was already there, blocking their escape. A pleasure to meet you. We are the League of Villains. Our purpose today is to end the life of All Might, and we believed he would be here. With a swirl of dark energy he surrounded them. But you will do as a consolation. My role is to scatter you, and torture you to death. The world became a vortex of darkness. Izuku felt a disorienting, wrenching sensation, like being pulled through a keyhole. He squeezed his eyes shut, and when he opened them again, the concrete plaza was gone. He was falling, the air thick with moisture and the smell of salt. He splashed into cold, churning water. He surfaced, gasping, in the center of the shipwreck zone. The massive dome of the USJ loomed above, a sky of steel and glass. In the water with him were Tsuyu Ajui, the frog-like girl with a long tongue, and Minoru Mineta, the diminutive boy whose quirk produced sticky purple spheres from his head. They were on a boat, but it was surrounded. Villains with aquatic quirks were circling them like sharks, their laughter echoing across the water. They knew the UA schedule. Izuku realized, his mind racing, pushing past the panic. They have someone with a warping quirk. They planned this. They're here for All Might. What followed was a desperate, terrifying fight for survival. Izuku, with his analytical mind, worked with Azuri's versatile abilities and Mineta's surprisingly effective quirk to create a plan. He came up with the idea to create a whirlpool, using his fingerflick smash to displace a massive amount of water. He stood at the edge of the boat, took a deep breath, and focused. He channeled One for All into his finger, the familiar green sparks dancing around his knuckle. But this time, something felt different. The presence of true, mortal danger, the immediate threat to his friends, acted as a catalyst. The golden energy within him, the power of Promethyl, was more awake, more alert than it had been during the quirk test. It wasn't just a calm ocean anymore. It was an ocean with a current, a deep, powerful tide that seemed to flow in concert with his own heroic resolve. He flicked his finger at the water's surface. Smash! The impact was far greater than he'd intended. It wasn't just a concussive blast. The green lightning of the smash was visibly intertwined with faint, shimmering threads of gold. The resulting whirlpool was immense, a vortex of incredible power that not only sucked in the surrounding villains but also nearly tore their boat apart. The water itself seemed to glow for a moment with a strange, ethereal light. Azuri and Mineta stared in awe. Midoriya, that was amazing! Azuri croaked, her usual calm expression broken by surprise. Izuku clutched his broken, throbbing finger, his mind reeling. The power had felt cleaner, more potent. The two energies had worked together, however briefly, and the result was exponentially greater than One for All alone. They managed to escape the shipwreck zone, making their way back to the central plaza, only to be met with a sight that froze the blood in their veins. Shota Aizawa, the formidable underground hero, was down. He lay broken and bloody at the feet of the monstrous creature, the Noma. His arm was bent at a horrifying, unnatural angle, and his face was being ground into the concrete by the creature's immense strength. The hand-covered villain, Tamura Shigaraki, cackled with childish glee. "You're so cool, Eraserhead," Shigaraki mocked. "But you stood no chance against our anti-symbol of peace, the bioengineer Noma." Izuku watched, hidden, his body trembling with a mixture of terror and rage. He saw the Noma raise its fist to deliver a final, crushing blow. He saw Azuri and Mineta frozen beside him, and he felt that instinct again, that selfless, idiotic, heroic impulse. But just as he was about to move, the doors to the USJ were blasted inward with a titanic boom. "Have no fear, students," a voice declared, a sound of pure, unadulterated hope. "Because I am here." All Might stood in the doorway, but he wasn't smiling. His face was a mask of cold, righteous fury. The battle that followed was the stuff of legends. It was a clash of titans, a hurricane of fists that shook the very foundations of the building. All Might moved like a blur, saving the last conscious students, retrieving Aizawa's broken form, and confronting the villains in the space of a heartbeat. But the Noma was his perfect counter. It had both shock absorption and super regeneration. It was a mindless puppet designed with the sole purpose of withstanding his power. Izuku could only watch, a helpless bystander, as his idol, his mentor, the symbol of peace, was pushed to his absolute limit. He saw the Noma catch All Might in a brutal bear hug, its claws digging into the hero's old wound, causing blood to spurt from his mouth. Kurojiri used his warp gate to trap All Might, the Noma's grip tightening, trying to snap his spine. "This is it, All Might!" Shigaraki cheered. "This is the end." Seeing All Might bleeding, seeing him trapped and on the verge of defeat, broke something in Izuku. The pity he had felt for Toshinori Yagi on that rooftop transformed into a fierce, protective rage. The hero who had given him hope, who had given him a chance, was about to be murdered. The divine energy, the essence of the champion of humanity, surged within him. It was a protective instinct magnified to a cosmic scale. He exploded from his hiding place, a green and gold blur. Bakugo and Kirishima, who had also arrived, launched their own attacks on Kurojiri, creating an opening. Todoroki froze half the Noma's body, causing its grip to loosen. And in that critical moment, Izuku flew towards Shigaraki. He wasn't aiming to fight. He was aiming to help All Might, to create a distraction, to do something. Shigaraki saw him coming. His red eyes widened behind the hand mask, his lips curling into a vicious grin. A brave little NPC has joined the party! He was faster than Izuku anticipated. As Izuku tried to land a blow, Shigaraki sidestepped and lunged, his own hand shooting out, all 5 fingers aiming for Izuku's face. Don't touch me! Izuku yelled, a primal scream of desperation. Shigaraki's hand made contact. The 5 fingers of the villain, the activation requirement for his terrifying quirk, decay, pressed against the skin of Izuku's cheek. For Shigaraki, there was a moment of triumphant anticipation. He felt his quirk activate, the insatiable hunger to turn all he touched to dust surging through his palm. He expected the boy's skin to crack, to flake, to disintegrate into nothingness. Instead, he was met with a sun. The moment his quirk touched Izuku's life force, it didn't find the fragile, flickering inner spark of a normal human. It slammed into the passive, protective aura of a sealed god. A brilliant, blinding shield of pure golden light erupted from Izuku's skin. It was not an aggressive blast, but an absolute, definitive rejection. The light was warm, pure, and radiated an authority that was ancient and absolute. Shigaraki's decay, a power based on entropy and destruction, was utterly incompatible with this energy of pure potential and creation. The golden light didn't just block the decay, it repelled it. The destructive energy of Shigaraki's quirk was turned back on itself, scorching his own palm. He screamed, a sound of pure shock and agony, and recoiled as if he had touched a live star. He stumbled backward, clutching his hand, which was now blistered and burned, the skin blackened as if seared by a holy fire. The hand mask was knocked askew by the concussive force of the light, revealing a single, terrified red eye, wide with disbelief and a strange, instinctual fear. It was not the fear of a stronger opponent. It was the primal, genetic fear of a creature of darkness encountering the literal dawn. What? Shigaraki rasped, his voice trembling. He stared at Izuku, who was now panting, a faint golden aura flickering around him like a dying flame. What are you? The entire USJ fell silent for a heartbeat. All Might, who had just broken free from the Noma's grip, stared in utter shock. The other students, 13, even Kurojiri, everyone saw the impossible, divine light that had flared from the boy who was supposed to be a simple strength enhancement type. Aizawa, drifting in and out of consciousness on the ground, saw it most clearly. His expert eyes, trained to analyze and understand powers in an instant, registered the event with chilling clarity. He had seen the green lightning of One for All. This golden, radiant shield was not that. It was something else entirely. Something new. Something impossible. The momentary distraction was all Might needed. The shock of the event, coupled with his own rage and desperation, pushed him beyond his limits. He met the Noma's charge not with defense, but with an overwhelming, unstoppable offense. You're right, villains! All Might roared, his voice shaking the dome. I am getting weaker. But I can still fight. I can still go beyond my best. What followed was not a fight. It was a storm. All Might threw hundreds of punches, each one faster and more powerful than the last, a blur of motion and a symphony of sonic booms. Plus Ultra! He screamed, delivering a final, catastrophic uppercut that sent the Noma blasting out of the USJ dome and into the sky, a man-made meteor disappearing into the clouds. The silence that followed was deafening. All Might stood, steam pouring from his body, on the verge of reverting to his true form. Shigaraki was still staring at Izuku, his mind unable to process what had just happened. The power he felt from that golden light, it was anathema to everything his master, All for One, had taught him about quirks. The sound of approaching sirens finally broke the spell. It's game over, Shigaraki hissed, scratching his neck furiously. You may have won this time, All Might, but look at you. You're weak. And you... He pointed a trembling, burnt finger at Izuku. You cheated. You're a bug in the system. A glitch. I'll kill you next time. I'll kill you both. Kurojiri quickly enveloped the twitching villain in his warp mist, and they vanished just as the pro-heroes, led by Principal Nizu, burst into the facility. Izuku finally collapsed to his knees, his adrenaline giving way to a bone-deep exhaustion. The golden energy receded, sinking back into the deep, calm ocean within him, leaving him feeling hollowed out and terrifyingly mortal. He looked at Shigaraki's scorched handprint on the ground, then at his own trembling fingers. The unraveling had begun. He had unleashed a power he didn't understand, revealed a secret he didn't know he had, and painted a target on his back for an enemy who now saw him not just as a student, but as an impossible, terrifying anomaly. The whispers from the Vestige realm were no longer just a personal crisis. They had just become a matter of life and death on a global scale. The aftermath of the USJ incident was a muted, somber affair. The flashing lights of police cars and ambulances painted the twilight sky in strobing hues of red and blue. Students, wrapped in emergency blankets, gave hushed, wide-eyed statements to detectives. The sheer, brutal reality of the attack had stripped away the glamour of heroism, replacing it with the cold, metallic taste of fear. Izuku sat on the steps of an ambulance, a paramedic checking his vitals for the third time. He was physically unharmed, a fact that in itself felt like a glaring accusation. His teacher, Mr. Aizawa, had been broken. 13 was grievously injured. All Might had pushed himself to the brink of collapse. Yet he, the boy who had been face to face with the ringleader, was untouched. He kept subconsciously touching his cheek where Shigaraki's hand had landed, half expecting to feel a scar or a patch of dead skin. But there was nothing. Only the memory of that blinding, impossible light. His friends, Uraraka and Ida, hovered nearby, their faces etched with concern. But their questions were about his well-being, about the shock of the event. No one mentioned the golden shield. In the chaos of the final battle, with All Might delivering a world-shaking beatdown and a monster being launched into the stratosphere, it had been a momentary, inexplicable flash. A trick of the light, a strange reflection. It was too bizarre, too outside the context of their understanding of quirks, for them to process. But a few had seen it with perfect, undeniable clarity. And they were not dismissing it. In a sterile, white debriefing room deep within the reinforced walls of UA High, a select group was gathered. Principal Nizu, the hyper-intelligent animal whose cheerful demeanor belied a mind as sharp and complex as a supercomputer, sat at the head of the table, his paws steepled before him. Beside him was a gaunt, exhausted Tashinori Yagi, a blanket draped over his skeletal shoulders. Aizawa was present via a video link from his hospital bed, his entire head swathed in bandages, leaving only a single, grimly determined eye visible. The final member of this clandestine meeting was recovery girl, Chio Shizenji, her expression more severe than Izuku had ever seen it. On a large monitor, the security footage from the USJ was playing on a loop. It was grainy, low-resolution footage from a wide-angle camera, but the event was unmistakable. The clip was only 3 seconds long. Frame 1, Shigaraki's hand makes contact with Midoriya's face. Frame 2, an eruption of brilliant, golden light, so intense it whites out the camera sensor for a fraction of a second. It is not an explosion, but a radiant, perfectly contained shield. Frame 3, Shigaraki is recoiling, his hands smoking. Midoriya is untouched, a faint, ethereal afterglow flickering around him before vanishing. "We have reviewed this from every available angle," Nizu began, his voice calm and measured, a stark contrast to the extraordinary nature of the evidence. "The energy signature does not match any known quirk in our extensive database. It bears no resemblance to the green bioelectric energy we have associated with young Midoriya's strength enhancement quirk. Furthermore," he paused, gesturing a paw toward Aizawa's image on the screen. "Our own expert on quirk analysis has a first-hand account." Aizawa's voice crackled through the speakers, rough and pained. "I saw it. When he was on the boat, his smash was different. Stronger. There was something else mixed in with One for All. Then, with Shigaraki, my quirk was inactive. I was down. But I could still feel it. It wasn't a quirk. Quirks have a specific feel to them, a biological hum. This was purer, like the energy of a star, not a person. It felt fundamental." Tashinori leaned forward, his hands clasped so tightly his knuckles were white. "When he first inherited One for All, he had a violent reaction. I chalked it up to his quirkless body adapting, But it was more than that. It was a convulsion, an exorcism in reverse. It was like One for All wasn't filling an empty space, but breaking down a door. Recovery girl nodded grimly. When I healed him after the entrance exam, I felt it. A second energy source. Deep, vast, and completely passive. My quirk couldn't interact with it. I could only sense its presence. It was like dipping my hand in the ocean and feeling the presence of a leviathan sleeping in the abyss. This footage, this is the first time we've seen the leviathan stir. Niza steepled his paws again, his dark, intelligent eyes scanning the faces of his colleagues. The conclusion is inescapable. Izuku Midoriya possesses a second, undocumented, and profoundly powerful ability, an ability that does not register as a quirk, cannot be erased like a quirk, and seems to operate on principles that defy our current understanding of metahuman biology. The question is not if, but what, and for that, I believe we need to step outside the conventional boundaries of science. He pressed a button on the console in front of him. I took the liberty of making a call. The individual I have summoned is unorthodox. Her field of study is considered fringe at best, pseudoscience at worst. But given the circumstances, I believe her unique expertise is not only warranted but necessary. The door to the debriefing room slid open. A woman stood there, her presence immediately commanding the room's attention. She was tall and lean, perhaps in her late 30s, with sharp, intelligent features and piercing gray eyes that seemed to analyze everything with a disconcerting intensity. Her hair was a cascade of dark, coiling braids shot through with a few distinguished strands of silver. She wore a tailored tweed jacket over a simple black turtleneck, an outfit that screamed academic but carried an air of worldly adventure, like a librarian who moonlighted as an archaeologist. In her hands she carried a worn leather satchel that looked like it had seen the inside of more ancient tombs than museums. "Principal Nizu," she said, her voice a smooth, confident contralto. "You said it was a matter of ontological priority. You have my attention. Dr. Thorne, thank you for coming on such short notice," Nizu said with a polite nod. "Please, allow me to introduce All Might, Recovery Girl, and Eraserhead. We have a situation that falls squarely within your peculiar area of expertise." Dr. Eris Thorne's gray eyes flickered to the skeletal form of All Might, then to the bandaged face on the screen. Not a hint of surprise or fan worship crossed her features. She was here for the puzzle, not the personalities. "My area of expertise is in pre-quark mythology, comparative theology, and anomalous energy phenomena. Most of my colleagues simply call it professional ghost chasing." "What ghost are we chasing today, Principal?" Niza simply gestured to the screen, playing the 3-second clip one more time. Eris Thorne leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. She watched it once, twice, a third time. The casual, academic air around her evaporated, replaced by a laser-like focus. A flicker of something, disbelief, recognition, awe flashed in her gray eyes. "Run a spectral analysis on the light flare," she commanded, her voice suddenly sharp, authoritative. "Filter for ethereal particle emissions. Check for residual chronosynclastic distortions." Nizu, without question, typed the commands into his console. The university's advanced analytical software, usually reserved for studying the physics of quirks, began processing her esoteric requests. A series of complex graphs and energy wave charts filled the screen. For Tashinori and Aizawa, they were meaningless squiggles. For Dr. Thorne, they were the verses of a forgotten holy text. She stared at the screen for a full minute, her expression unreadable. She then walked over to the monitor, her long fingers tracing one of the glowing lines on the screen. "I've seen this signature before," she whispered, more to herself than to anyone else. "Not in a lab. In the apocryphal texts of the silent monks of the Osumi Peninsula, in the glyphs of the pre-Sumerian star worshippers. They called it Ethel, the light of creation, the breath of the first spark." She turned back to the room, her eyes burning with an intellectual fire that bordered on fanaticism. "Where is the boy who did this? I need to see him." Now, Izuku was summoned to the principal's office the next day. He walked the hallowed, empty halls in a state of deep anxiety, the summons feeling more like a verdict than a meeting. He expected to be questioned, perhaps even punished for losing control or revealing a power he couldn't explain. He had spent a sleepless night staring at his own reflection, wondering if the boy staring back was even real, or just a mask for the slumbering god within. When he entered the office, he was surprised to see not just Nizu and a very tired-looking All Might, but also the strange, intense woman from the hallway. Nizu's office was a marvel of organization and comfort, yet the atmosphere was thick with a tension that felt ancient and profound. "Midoriya-kun, thank you for joining us," Nizu said, gesturing to a chair. "This is Dr. Eris Thorne, a specialist consultant to UA, Izuku Midoriya," Dr. Thorne said, her gray eyes scanning him from head to toe. It didn't feel like a judgment, but an analysis, as if she were reading the text of his very DNA. "Born quirkless, correct?" Manifested a powerful strength enhancement quirk on the day of the entrance exam. Recipient of one for all, Izuku flinched. The casual way she stated the most guarded secret in the hero world sent a jolt of panic through him. "Do not worry, my boy," All Might interjected, offering a weak but reassuring smile. "Dr. Thorne has the highest possible security clearance. She is here to help us understand what happened at the USJ." Thorne ignored the pleasantries. She placed her leather satchel on the coffee table and unbuckled its brass clasps. From it, she removed a device that looked like a bizarre fusion of antique and futuristic technology. It had a polished brass casing, like a Victorian astrolabe, but it was covered in glowing fiber-optic cables and featured a holographic display that shimmered in the air above it. "This is an etheric resonance scanner," she explained, her voice all business. "Standard quirk scanners measure biological energy output, the so-called quirk factor. This device measures something older. It reads the echoes of fundamental energies, the background radiation of reality itself. I'm going to activate it. It is perfectly harmless. I simply need a baseline reading of the room, and then of you." She pressed a rune-like symbol on the brass casing. The device emitted a low, pleasant hum, and the holographic display showed a calm, gently fluctuating wave pattern, like a placid lake. "The ambient etheric field of the room," she noted. "Stable. Now, Midoriya-kun, would you please hold out your hand?" Hesitantly, Izuku extended his hand. Dr. Thorne moved the device closer. As it neared his skin, the scanner began to react. The low hum pitched upward into a frantic, high-frequency whine. The calm blue wave on the hologram turned into a chaotic, jagged spike of brilliant gold, the readings shooting off the top of the scale. Alarms, soft electronic chimes, began to sound from the device. Ethereal signature detected, category Omega, source identified, Promethean core dormant, warning, reality distortion potential exceeds measurable limits. Thorne's breath hitched. Her professional composure cracked, revealing the raw, unadulterated awe of a scholar who had just found her holy grail. She stared at the readings, then at Izuku, then back at the readings. "It's real," she breathed, her voice filled with a reverence that bordered on worship. "All the myths, the fragments, the whispers through history. It's real." "Doctor, what is it?" Tashinori asked, leaning forward, his voice tight with apprehension. Thorne deactivated the scanner, the frantic whining mercifully ceasing. She sank back into her chair, her sharp features softened by a look of profound wonder. She looked at Izuku, not as a student or a subject, but as a living, breathing miracle. "For my entire career," she began, her voice regaining its composure, though the undertone of excitement was palpable, "I have pursued a theory. A theory dismissed by my peers as romantic fantasy. The theory of the cosmic genesis of quirks." She leaned forward, her gray eyes locking onto Izuku's. "The scientific explanation for the dawn of quirks is that it was a spontaneous, planet-wide evolutionary leap, a virus, solar radiation, a natural progression. It's neat, tidy, and in my opinion, utterly wrong. It doesn't account for the sheer variety, the flagrant disregard for the laws of physics, the narrative, almost mythological nature of so many quirks. It's not evolution. It's an inheritance." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle in the room. "My theory is based on cross-referencing thousands of pre-quirk myths from every culture on Earth. The story is always the same, hidden in different clothes. The myth of Prometheus, who stole fire from the gods and gave it to mankind. The story of the lone dragons of ancient China, who gifted the first emperor the spark of the heavens. The Anansi tales of West Africa, describing a trickster who brought the stuff of stories down to the mortal world. Fire. Spark. Story. It's all a metaphor for the same thing, potential. The raw stuff of creation. She stood up and began to pace, her lecture hall instincts taking over. The myth always ends the same way. The benevolent, gift-giving deity is punished by its celestial brethren. The other gods, who saw humanity as mere clay, feared this gift. They feared a world where mortals could shape their own reality, where they could become gods themselves. And so, the champion of humanity was cast out, broken, and sentenced to oblivion. His gift, the inner spark, was left to gestate within humanity, a divine seed planted in mortal soil. Over millennia, it grew, it adapted, it evolved. And one day, in Qingqing, China, the first gifted child began to glow. That wasn't the dawn of quirks. That was merely the first bloom of a flower whose seed was planted at the dawn of civilization. She stopped pacing and turned, her gaze fixed entirely on Izuku, who was sitting frozen in his chair, his blood running cold, the pieces of his dreams, his visions, and his own internal reality clicking into place with horrifying speed. I have spent my life searching for proof. For the source. The ethereal signature of the fallen star, as the oldest texts call it. She gestured back toward the scanner on the table. That device just confirmed it. The energy signature it read from you, the same energy that created that shield at the USJ, is a perfect match for the theoretical signature of the first spark. It is the raw, undiluted source code of every quirk on the planet. She took a deep breath, her eyes wide with the sheer, earth-shattering magnitude of her discovery. She looked Izuku directly in the eye, her voice dropping to a near whisper, laden with a significance that made the very air in the room feel heavy. Midoriya-kun, she said, her voice clear and absolute. I don't believe you have a quirk. I believe you are the origin of them.